Let me say a pleasant good evening to our first guest, a man who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a special evening to Dr. Kirk Meighoo, PRO of the United National Congress. Good evening and welcome, sir.
Good evening to you.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you on as always. A lot taking place last night, of course, at the meeting, the Monday night meeting of the United National Congress. Political leader, opposition leader Kamala Prasad Bisesa said that third parties, the UNC is more than willing to enter any sort of discussion. However, the UNC will not be disrespected, and those parties, groups, or whoever stakeholders must carry their weight. I mean, very important. I mean, it was if she read the Riot Act to say, listen, there are things that we will tolerate, but there are things that we, the UNC, will not compromise on. Expand on that, please.
Yes, it's a very important statement and it's very necessary because it's as if, some of these, some third parties, and I'm not going to name names, but it's a pattern, right? Because this is not really about individuals, but it's really a pattern that's been going back for years and years, that a lot of these third parties, what they do is they insult the majority of voters in this country. Because the majority of voters in this country support UNC or PNN, right? The majority in Trinidad actually supports UNC. But, and what they do is they insult them by saying they're tribal voters. They don't think. They're stupid. They have us backward. So there's this very and somehow they are the true national party. You see it over and over again. So they're insulting the vast majority of people, and even when the facts of the matter are not, do not support the case. And so that's the one thing. So they position themselves as somehow being above, and that the majority of the country are just mindless illiterates who only think about race. But that is an insult to every thinking person who votes for the UNC, and I would even say to the PNN, right? To be generous in that respect. So that is one thing, and we do not want our supporters to be insulted like that, and especially by people who we'll be working with, that somehow our supporters are stupid, tribal, racist, but their supporters are intelligent, forward-looking patriots. That is absolutely not true, and that kind of characterization cannot be tolerated.
And let me ask you this, Dr. Meighoo. I mean, I for those folks who would weigh in and say, we believe that, politicians are people where, I may not like your chicken soup, but I can't tell you how to make it. In the midst of all of that, because it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. But people may want to express themselves. How do you then pick out what should be defined as constructive criticism rather than someone just simply blowing out steam, and believe that, listen, if I can't say at least something that can be considered, how am I going to fit into this political equation with any party?
Right. Well, yes. I mean, the whole thing about dissent and having different opinions. I mean, the UNC is a party of many independent thinkers, but there's a difference between insulting people and having constructive criticism, and that has to be maintained. There has to be a level of respect there. And just one final thing, because I mean, in my own past, right? Because I have been working with other parties for a very long time. From my days with Lloyd Best in the 2000s, and then the DNA later, and so forth. I have noticed that a lot of this attitude among so many of these people who use that paradigm, then when they don't get the votes or they lose their deposit, what they do, they end up cussing the people of the country and saying how stupid they are, how tribal they are, how backward they are. And that always grated me. It was like, I think you never loved the people in the first place. You didn't get what you want, and now you cuss them and call them stupid, you know. And so I have, you know, a lot of sympathy with the view that Mrs. Prasad Bisesha expressed yesterday, because I noticed a sort of contempt that people have for the majority of people of Trinidad and Tobago, you know, and there's a lot of class element in it too, which I find distasteful.
Yeah, I mean, I always look at critics as individuals who would wait until the battle is over and the dust has settled, and they'll say, perhaps you should have used a shield rather than a sword. And they always come in at that point in time that's convenient to them. Now, I agree fully that if you're part of something and you leave, you really can't weigh in much into it because you didn't stay to build. What you wanted changes, what you wanted to see evolve, you left. So whoever remained there and was committed and dedicated to the cause, I don't think that gives anybody a right to weigh in on them and saying that, listen, they're no good, they're incompetent. You left.
That's right, exactly. And you know, when things get rough, when, let's say, when the UNC, for example, you know, in its darkest days, when people, you know, have such, you know, have negative views, when the media is against us, our supporters are there. They hold the faith, they come out to the meetings, they keep the institutions alive, they go on the media like yourself and push back, you know, when people are spreading falsehoods and so forth. And it is only that action that has kept this party alive for 30 years, right? It is the faithfulness of the base. And then it cannot be that a star or a supposed star or a self-appointed star, you know, comes in and then says, well, I am socially superior, I am more intelligent, I am of a different class, and so therefore I deserve X, Y, Z position. You know, and the people who really, really you know, carried the party on their backs and on their shoulder when everything was down, when the chips were down, they are left in the wilderness. That is not right. That is not right.
Well, I mean, a lot is going to be said, but let me ask you, how challenging is it in your capacity functioning as PRO to keep that message across? I mean, what the political leader is saying and what people would expect. I mean, if the political leader is saying the door is open, come in, make your contribution, be a part of it, be disciplined. But what if there are individuals who may have some personal issue based on personality? How then do you put that in check and say, no, listen, you are going contrary to what the leader is saying? We can't invite people, and then when they get to the door, we close it on them. How difficult is it for you to keep that message going?
Well, it is a challenge, you know. I can't lie and say it's easy, you know. It is a challenge in the politics, in our political culture, you know. Their egos are a big thing to manage and to deal with, and a lot of times I find that the idea of teamwork, you know, and the ethos of teamwork is lacking a lot in people, and there's still a lot of individualism and so it's a work in progress in the country as a whole. This is something that people have been talking about since the 50s and before. You know, I think it is part of our culture, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because it's kind of the dynamism of life in Trinidad. You know, we have a special kind of flair and all these characters, and that makes us who we are, you know. Very, you know, in a very interesting, and for good and for ill. That's us, and you know, and we love it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, even in the role that you play, as I said, the role that you function in is not just about getting the press releases out there. I mean, you still have to play the role of sometimes babysitter, someone who will have to calm the egotistic flames, someone who may be a referee. There are days I'm sure you want to pull your hair out. But what are the factors? What are the factors of the UNC that keep you on track to say, listen, this is the big picture, and this is what we're aiming for?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's something I've been, for some reason, it's something that I've been speaking about a lot to people personally. You know, the UNC comes from a particular tradition. It's the last living embodiment of the tradition of Rienzi and Butler. That tradition that was for the working people, always seeking to unite the African and Indian masses against exploitation, and that tradition is totally different from the PNM tradition. The PNM tradition was about just taking over from the British and being the new masses, but this Butler-Rienzi line then went on to protest the neo-colonialism of the PNM, went to the Workers' and Farmers' Party, which is the roots of the UNC, with CLR James, Stephen Mirage, Bastio Pandey, Trevor Sudama, and others, and then later the Black Power movement, which was against the PNM, right, which disrespected the ancestral traditions of our people, and they wanted us just to be, black and brown Britishers. But that whole Black Power tradition, the radical trade union movement, this is what then formed the ULF and then the UNC. This is a long tradition and always fighting for authentic development for the masses of people, and respecting our heritage, our culture, in every sphere, and making sure that we are all included. That is something, and it has a decades, over 100 years of history here, and perhaps even longer. And this is what just totally has always inspired me. And there were many groups coming out of that, but the UNC is the biggest one and the last one standing, because after the UNC, it seems like a lot of people have forgotten about that struggle. And to me, that is the most important movement in our country's history. You know, as a historian, as a political scientist who's looked and written about these things for a long time, this is what I am absolutely committed to, and committed to keeping the UNC grounded in this ideological and sociological base.
Yeah, you did touch on it earlier, but of course the political leader said that the notion that people want something other than the PNM or UNC, or that our politics is tribal, isn't true. It's more of a talking point used by people seeking to forge a political space that has never been carefully analyzed. I mean, you would hear it all the time. The UNC can only reach this far. There are certain areas, there are certain parts of Trinidad and Tobago that will not be welcome into the UNC, perhaps because of the base. And I think there are those who will use that perhaps as a political selling point, but the leader is saying, that in itself is a myth, a social myth. Have you been able to analyze and say, listen, those areas that people are selling as far as what they can do, it's something that simply does not exist, and the UNC can achieve in those areas?
Okay, let me give an anecdote and from personal experience. I mean, I remember in 2020, I went up Laventille several times with Ron Millington, who, and on behalf of, he was seeking, to perhaps represent the party in that area. And so we went up Laventille many times. We shot videos. I have it on my Facebook page. And we were so welcoming. There were areas Fitzgerald Hines couldn't go to, right? Remember, he was kicked with water in the Beetham, right? But up in Laventille, they just despised Hines so much. And they embraced us. so wholeheartedly. We went with UNC flags and jerseys and so forth, and there was no tension. I mean, we have the videos and so forth. There was nothing. There was no hostility, and in fact, many people would say, "We want to see Kamala. We want to see Kamala. Bring Kamala here." I remember in the 90s when I was lecturing at UWI. There was a young student wearing a UNC shirt, and that was shocking at the time, because it's like you did not dare to wear a UNC shirt in public in the 1990s, because the UNC was so vilified as some sort of parochial party, some kind. The media and the PNM just put this label on the UNC so that people were embarrassed to even be seen in a UNC t-shirt. Now, I mean, people wear their shirts with pride everywhere, all along the east-west corridor. That is a huge change that people don't realize. I don't think people realize how taboo it was at one point to openly wear a UNC shirt, and now it's like nothing.
Yeah. Another thing that stood out is when the political leader said that, "I remember the Panday days. Our supporters were treated like sheep. The hierarchy of that time would say to bring people, bring sheep, and treat our supporters as menial, and every meeting, one or two fellows would talk to the sheep. I always detested that treatment of our supporters. That's why I promote those from our rank and file." Is she saying basically these are individuals who have been tried and tested, their commitment, their passion, their dedication, and sometimes when you have internal factors coming in, that in itself may not pan out well as far as the future?
Yeah, I mean, it does, reflect a change that she did bring in the party, and it reflects her own, coming up through the party, very humbly. Right? She didn't come in as a star. She came in humbly. She was an alderman, and then she became AG, but she wasn't first AG. She was an alderman at first, and she's always had this love for the poor, for the humble. I always find it endearing, and when she talks about how she used to sell bhaji, in the market, and how she used to plant rice, and all her stories of growing up, and she doesn't run away from that path. She's not embarrassed about that path. She's not ashamed. She embraces it, and she wants, and she has such empathy for people in similar conditions. She totally understands it, and absolutely treats them as full human beings, and doesn't look down on them. And when there are elitist elements, sometimes, sadly, even within the party at times, it's something that she just really does not countenance, and it's something she has a sort of visceral reaction to. She is just really so deeply committed to the ordinary, humble people of the country.
I mean, on the very said night that she is saying, listen, to all those people who are interested, all these groups, all these parties, we can have this conversation, but you have to bring something to the table, and we're not going to stand for disrespect. She also made it quite clear that the UNC general election nominations will close soon and screening begins shortly. Was it a matter of laying out everything and then saying, listen, we're going to then get down to UNC business, and that is going forward with the 2025 general elections?
Yes, definitely. So no matter what, we're going forward. No one can hold us hostage or wave some sort of inferiority complex in front of us and, you can't win. Of course we can't. We are a national party. We are the largest, most dynamic party in the country. The PNM can't hold meetings like we hold meetings all throughout the country every week. They can't do that. Not even the ruling party can do that. We are strong. We are, we have a deep bench of talent, of intelligence, of experience, and of fresh faces and fresh blood as well. And the statistics are in our favor as our party grows. If you look at the numbers, people don't look at the numbers, but when you look at the numbers in terms of the number of votes, in terms of the seats, we keep growing and growing and growing. And when you put the local government election results of just last year onto the parliamentary map, we win, right? So we would have won had that been a parliamentary election.
Right. So is it right to say that last night was the unofficial kickoff of the UNC general election campaign for 2025?
I think we may have kicked it off before, but certainly we are definitely openly in election mode, and we've re-emphasized it, I would say.
All right. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
I just want to thank you for all the work you've done. You are also one of our stalwarts, and I know many of the listeners on your program are also our stalwarts, and we are not going to forget you. We are not going to leave you behind, even as we embrace others. Do not fear that we will discard you for people who present themselves as stars. We know that it is on the backs of our supporters that we exist.
All right. Thank you so much, and best of luck to you and your entire team. Keep up the good work, and we'll be checking in with you periodically. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have a good night to you and your listeners.
Thank you.